Sienna Calloway never imagined her own husband, Damon Calloway, would plot her murder, but as she uncovered his chilling plan, she realized she was living on borrowed time. Damon Calloway and Sienna Crestwood had a marriage that seemed flawless to anyone looking from the outside. They lived in a grand estate in Charleston, South Carolina, a home that spoke of wealth and success. Damon was a prominent real estate developer, known for turning abandoned spaces into high-end properties, while Sienna had once been an aspiring artist, but had set aside her dreams to support her husband's career. Their life was filled with elegant dinner parties, luxury vacations, and public displays of affection that made them the envy of their social circle. But beneath the polished surface, cracks had started to form. Cracks that Sienna could feel, but struggled to understand. Damon was changing. He had once been the kind of man who never left the house without kissing her goodbye, who would hold her hand in public without thinking twice. Now, there was distance. His once affectionate touch had turned into brief, absent-minded gestures. His conversations were shorter, his smiles forced. Sienna told herself it was work. The stress of running a business, handling clients, and constantly staying ahead in a competitive industry was bound to take its toll. She had seen Damon under pressure before, but this time it felt different. The change was subtle at first. He started coming home later than usual, his explanations vague, long meetings, unexpected client calls, urgent projects that needed his attention. When she asked for details, he provided just enough to satisfy her curiosity, but not enough for her to piece together a full picture. His phone became a permanent fixture in his hand, face down on the table whenever they sat together. Calls were answered in hushed tones, often with him stepping outside or into another room before speaking. Sienna wanted to trust him. She reminded herself that marriages had ups and downs, that sometimes love changed shape but didn't disappear. She ignored the nagging feeling in her chest, dismissing it as paranoia. But then, small things started to pile up, things she couldn't ignore no matter how hard she tried. There was the scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, subtle yet distinct. It wasn't her fragrance. She had been wearing the same signature scent for years, and this, wasn't it? There were the unexplained expenses on their credit card statements, dinners at high-end restaurants she had never been to, purchases from boutiques she had never stepped foot in. One evening, as she did laundry, she found a receipt tucked inside one of Damon's suit pockets. It was from an upscale hotel, a place known for discretion and exclusivity. The date on the receipt matched a night when he had told her he was out of town for a business meeting. A lump formed in her throat as she stared at it, her hands trembling. For the first time, suspicion turned into something more concrete, something she couldn't push away with excuses. She thought back to their wedding day, the vows they had exchanged, the promises of loyalty, love, and forever. She had never doubted those words until now. The thought of Damon betraying her was unbearable, but so was the idea of living in ignorance, pretending nothing was wrong. Sienna tried to confront him in subtle ways, making small comments about his late hours, asking about his meetings with just enough curiosity to gauge his reaction. He never got angry, but his responses were carefully measured, as if he were walking a tightrope. She confided in her best friend, Ilara Whitman, who had known them since their early years together. Ilara listened patiently, concern deepening in her eyes as Sienna laid out the small but troubling signs. She didn't jump to conclusions, but she didn't dismiss Sienna's fears either. "Trust your instincts," she had said. It was a simple statement, but it carried weight. Sienna couldn't ignore her instincts anymore. They screamed at her. Every time Damon walked into the house smelling of something unfamiliar, every time his phone buzzed late at night, every time she looked into his eyes and saw something she no longer recognized. She had always believed that if their marriage faced trouble, they would fight for it together. But now, she wasn't sure if Damon was even willing to fight at all. One night, unable to shake the unease, Sienna decided to follow him. It wasn't something she had ever imagined herself doing, but desperation had taken hold. Damon had told her he was working late again, his tone casual, as if he had said it 100 times before. Instead of staying home, she waited until he left and then took her car, driving at a distance behind him. Her heart pounded as she followed him across town. He wasn't heading toward his office. Instead, he drove to an upscale restaurant, one of the same ones that had appeared on their credit card statements. She parked discreetly, watching from a distance as he stepped inside. A few minutes later, a woman joined him at his table. Even from afar, Sienna could see the familiarity in the way they leaned toward each other, the way he smiled at her, an easy, effortless smile she hadn't seen in months. Her stomach twisted, a cold realization settling over her like a heavy weight. This wasn't just a passing attraction. It wasn't just stress or work or anything she could justify. Damon had moved on. Sienna sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady her breath. A part of her had always feared this moment, but another part had clung to hope. That hope shattered in an instant. She had loved Damon for years, stood by his side through everything, believed in the life they had built. But now she saw the truth, and the truth was devastating. Lila Voss was the kind of woman who commanded attention the moment she walked into a room. Tall, striking, and effortlessly elegant, she had an air of confidence that made people gravitate toward her. She was ambitious, driven, and unapologetically independent, qualities that had helped her climb the ranks in the luxury real estate industry. She wasn't just another agent, she was a force. Clients sought her out, and competitors envied her. It was in this high-stakes world that she first crossed paths with Damon Calloway. Their connection was instantaneous. It started as professional discussions about market trends, investment opportunities, and business strategies. But beneath the surface, there was an undeniable chemistry. Damon had been drawn to her from the moment they met. She was everything he found exciting, sharp-witted, bold, and unafraid to challenge him. Unlike Sienna, who had once been a dreamer, but had settled into the quiet routine of marriage, Lila was electric. She reminded him of a version of himself he thought he had lost, the risk-taker, the man who thrived on adrenaline and ambition. Their flirtation escalated quickly. At first, it was just stolen glances during meetings, lingering touches when exchanging business cards, or the occasional text that lingered too long in subtext. But lines blurred faster than either of them expected. The first time Damon met her outside of work, it was under the pretense of discussing a major property deal over drinks. One drink turned into two, and then three. Their conversation shifted from business to personal, their laughter a little too intimate, their gazes a little too lingering. It didn't take long before they crossed the threshold of professionalism entirely. What started as secret meetings in dimly lit bars evolved into passionate encounters in luxury hotel rooms. Damon felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. He told himself it was harmless at first, that it was just an escape from the monotony of marriage. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He was falling for Lila, and she was falling for him. Lila wasn't content being the woman in the shadows. She had spent her life building herself up, never settling for second place in anything. And she certainly wasn't going to be a side piece forever. She wanted more. She wanted Damon entirely. At first, she was patient. She let him bask in the thrill of secrecy. Let him believe that their affair existed in a bubble separate from the rest of his life. But as weeks turned into months, she started pushing for more. She asked him about his marriage, about Sienna. She wanted to know if there was anything left between them, if Damon still loved his wife. His answers were always vague, but he never denied that his feelings for Sienna had faded. Lila saw the hesitation in his eyes when she brought up divorce, the flicker of uncertainty when she asked why he was still holding on to a marriage that seemed dead. The truth was, Damon couldn't afford to walk away so easily. His wealth was intertwined with Sienna's, their assets linked in ways that would make separation financially disastrous. A divorce would mean dividing everything, potentially losing a significant portion of his real estate empire. Sienna had been with him since the beginning, before he had built his fortune, and the law would be on her side. He had too much to lose. Lila wasn't interested in his financial concerns. She had worked hard to become the woman she was, and she wasn't about to waste her time on a man who couldn't make up his mind. She started pulling away, making herself less available, letting him feel what it was like to lose her. Damon panicked. He had convinced himself that what he had with Lila was special, something worth risking everything for. The thought of losing her ignited something desperate inside him. One night, as they lay tangled in the sheets of a high-rise hotel room, Lila gave him an ultimatum. She was done being a secret. If he truly wanted to be with her, he needed to make a choice. She wasn't going to wait forever. Damon didn't answer right away, but the seed had been planted. The idea festered in his mind, growing into something darker. As the days passed, he found himself imagining a life without Sienna. Not a life where he simply left her, but a life where she no longer existed. A life where he didn't have to deal with divorce settlements, financial losses, or the shame of a failed marriage. A life where he was free. The more he thought about it, the more the idea started to take shape. He had always been meticulous in his business dealings, always one step ahead of the competition. He had built his empire through careful planning and strategic moves. He had outmaneuvered rivals, crushed obstacles, and taken what he wanted. Was this any different? Lila had unknowingly given him the final push. She wanted him to make a choice, and now he was starting to believe there was only one way to make it. Damon had spent his entire life getting what he wanted, and he wasn't about to stop now. Sienna had always trusted her instincts. They had guided her through life's challenges, helping her navigate relationships, friendships, and difficult decisions. But now, those same instincts screamed at her in a way she could no longer ignore. She knew something was terribly wrong, and it wasn't just about Damon's affair. There was something darker lurking beneath the surface, something she couldn't quite put her finger on, but could feel in the pit of her stomach. Damon's behavior had shifted once again, but this time it was different. Before, he had been distant, preoccupied, his mind clearly somewhere else. Now, he was attentive, overly considerate in a way that felt unnatural. He started bringing her flowers, something he hadn't done in years. He made a point to have dinner with her every night, asking about her day, listening with a focus that felt forced. If she hadn't known better, she might have believed he was trying to fix their marriage, but she did know better. It was as if he was playing a role, one he had rehearsed carefully. He wanted her to feel comfortable, to let her guard down, but she wouldn't. The unease inside her only grew stronger. At night, she found herself lying, awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the puzzle that was her husband. She thought about the hotel receipt, the perfume on his clothes, the late nights, the secret phone calls. And then, she thought about his recent change in demeanor, the sudden warmth, the forced affection, the way he seemed to be watching her, waiting for something. She wasn't sure when the thought first crossed her mind, but once it did, she couldn't shake it. Was she in danger? The idea seemed absurd at first. Damon was her husband. They had built a life together, spent years sharing dreams, memories, and love. But then, she reminded herself that the man she had married wasn't the same man standing before her now. She had seen it in his eyes, in the way he spoke, in the way he touched her. There was something missing, something hollow. One evening, as she cleaned up after dinner, she noticed him watching her. He stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, a glass of whiskey in hand. His eyes followed her movements, tracking her in a way that sent a chill down her spine. When he realized she had noticed, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The air between them felt heavy, suffocating. Sienna forced herself to act normal, to keep up the facade that she was oblivious to whatever was going through his mind, but inside she was unraveling. She had never felt fear in her own home before, but now every shadow, every sound, every glance from Damon felt like a warning. She knew she needed to do something. She couldn't just sit back and wait for whatever was coming. She had to be smart, careful. If Damon was planning something, she couldn't let him know she suspected it. That night, while he slept beside her, she got out of bed as silently as possible. Her heart pounded as she tiptoed to his office, the one place in the house he had always kept private. He never let her go through his things, always keeping his documents and work locked away. But tonight, she needed answers. She carefully searched through his desk drawers, her hands trembling as she sifted through papers, bank statements, and files. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until she found a folder tucked away beneath a stack of business documents. Inside, she found something that made her blood run cold, a recently signed life insurance policy. Her name was on it. The payout was substantial. Her breath caught in her throat as she flipped through the pages, her hands shaking violently. The policy had been updated just weeks ago, and it wasn't just the amount that sent terror through her veins. It was the beneficiary. Damon! Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Had he always had this policy? Was it just a precaution, something normal that she had never paid attention to? Or was this something new, something intentional? She put everything back exactly as she had found it, making sure not to leave any trace that she had been there. As she crept back to bed, her heart pounded so loudly she was afraid it might wake him. Lying in the darkness, she realized the truth. Damon was planning something, and whatever it wasn't good. Panic gripped her, but she forced herself to remain calm. She needed a plan. She couldn't confront him. Not yet. If she was right, if he truly intended to harm her, she couldn't let him know she was onto him. She had to be smart, calculating, just as he was. She thought about the past few weeks, the way he had suddenly started treating her differently, the way he had been watching her. Had he been waiting for the right moment? Was he already putting his plan into motion? She didn't know how much time she had, but one thing was certain. She needed to get out. Before it was too late. Sienna knew she had to be careful. If Damon suspected she had discovered his plans, there was no telling what he might do. Every move she made had to be calculated. Every word spoken had to sound normal. She continued her daily routine as if nothing had changed. But inside, she was unraveling. She found herself hyper-aware of everything. How he looked at her. How he moved around the house. How he lingered just a little too long when standing behind her. She had to act fast. Her first instinct was to go to the police, but what could she say? That she had a feeling her husband was planning to kill her. That she had found a life insurance policy with his name on it. That wasn't enough. She needed something concrete, something that would make them take her seriously. She thought about running, disappearing in the middle of the night, but she knew Damon was too smart for that. He had resources, connections. If she simply vanished, he would find her. And if he couldn't, he would find a way to make it look like she had abandoned their marriage. She had no doubt he would twist the narrative, making himself the victim, while she became just another woman who had walked away. She needed to gather proof. During the day, while Damon was at work, she searched their home for anything that could confirm her suspicions. She went through his emails, checked his phone records when he wasn't looking, and even searched his car. But Damon had covered his tracks well. There were no suspicious messages, no secret bank accounts, no hidden documents that could give her the answers she needed. Then she remembered something, his office downtown. Damon kept an apartment in the city, a place he used when working late or meeting with clients. Sienna had been there before, but she had never paid attention to what he kept inside. If there was anything incriminating, it had to be there. That evening, she told Damon she was meeting an old friend for dinner. He didn't question her, simply nodding as he sipped his whiskey. But she could tell he was watching her, assessing her. She kept her expression neutral, her voice light, and forced herself to smile as she kissed his cheek before leaving. Her hands trembled as she drove to his apartment. the weight of what she was doing pressing down on her chest. The building was upscale, secured with a keycard system. But Sienna had been there enough times to know where he kept his spare. She retrieved it from its hiding spot and slipped inside, her heart pounding. The apartment was pristine, as if rarely used, but as she walked through the space, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. There was no trace of her, no framed photos of their wedding, no small personal items that hinted at their life together. It was as if this was a space where she did not exist. She moved quickly, searching his desk, his drawers, his closet. At first, she found nothing unusual. But then, tucked away in a locked drawer, she found a folder similar to the one in his office at home. Her breath hitched as she flipped through its contents. There were printed out emails between Damon and someone she didn't recognize, Lila Voss. The name sent a wave of nausea through her. He had been careful to delete his messages from his phone, but he had kept copies here. The emails were explicit, detailing his relationship with Lila, his promises to her, his plans for a future together. But that wasn't what made her blood run cold. Further into the folder, she found notes, handwritten ones. They outlined different scenarios, different ways he could make her disappearance look like an accident. A staged car crash, a supposed drowning, even a break-in gone wrong. Each possibility was written in chilling detail, including steps on how he would establish an alibi. Tears burned in her eyes as she clutched the papers. This was it, the proof she needed. She pulled out her phone and took photos of everything, making sure to capture every detail. She needed to get these to the police. But as she turned to leave, she heard something that made her freeze. The front door clicked open. Panic shot through her as she scrambled to put everything back in place. She barely had time to slip into the closet before Damon stepped inside. She held her breath, pressing herself against the back wall, praying he wouldn't hear the frantic pounding of her heart. She listened as he moved through the apartment, his footsteps slow, deliberate. He was on the phone. "I know, I just left the house. She has no idea." Soon. His voice was calm, almost amused. Sienna clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had been right all along. Damon walked into the bedroom, pausing just feet from where she hid. The sound of him placing his keys on the dresser echoed in the silence. She stayed as still as possible, not daring to move. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked out. She waited until she heard the front door close before she dared to breathe. She had to get out. She had to get to the police, and she had to do it before Damon realized she knew everything. "You said..." Sienna waited until she was sure Damon was gone before she slipped out of the closet. Her hands were shaking, her legs weak beneath her as she moved toward the door. She clutched her phone, the evidence she had gathered flashing on the screen. It was enough to prove his intentions, enough to make someone take her seriously. She stepped into the hallway, her breath unsteady. The city lights flickered through the large windows at the end of the corridor, but she had no time to admire them. She needed to get out of the building before Damon returned, or realized she had been in his apartment. Her footsteps were fast but careful as she made her way to the elevator. She pressed the button repeatedly, her pulse racing as the seconds stretched unbearably long. The doors finally slid open, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the parking garage. The ride down felt eternal, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing the fear in her wide eyes. As soon as the doors opened, she rushed toward her car, fumbling with her keys. Her hands were trembling too much, and she dropped them. Cursing, under her breath, she bent down to pick them up, only to freeze when she caught sight of something in the reflection of the car's window. A figure. Damon. He stood just a few feet away, watching her. Her blood turned to ice. She forced herself to stay calm, straightening slowly as she turned to face him. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something dark and calculating. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice smooth, casual, but she could hear the underlying tension. Her mind raced for an excuse. "I thought I left something here last time," she said, keeping her voice steady, her fingers tightening around her phone in her pocket. Damon took a slow step forward. "Is that so?" She nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. She had to get away. He tilted his head, studying her. Then, his gaze flickered to her phone. In that instant, she knew he had figured it out. Before she could react, he lunged. Sienna turned and bolted, her body moving on pure adrenaline. She sprinted between the parked cars, weaving to put as much distance between them as possible. She could hear his footsteps pounding behind her, closing in. She reached the stairwell door and yanked it open, rushing inside. She ran up the stairs 2 at a time, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew she couldn't outrun him forever. She burst onto the ground level, shoving the door open and stumbling into the street. The cool night air hit her face as she ran toward the nearest intersection. A car was approaching. She threw herself into the street, waving her arms frantically. The vehicle screeched to a stop, the driver honking in alarm. Damon had just stepped out of the garage when the car door swung open and a woman got out, yelling at Sienna, asking if she was okay. Sienna turned, locking eyes with Damon across the street. For the first time, she saw something in his face she had never seen before. Defeat. He knew he had lost. The police arrived within minutes after the driver called them, and Sienna showed them everything: her photos, the notes, the emails. She recounted everything, from the life insurance policy to the way he had been acting, to how she had found him waiting for her in the garage. Damon was arrested on the spot. In the days that followed, everything unraveled. The police searched his apartment and found more evidence, meticulously planned documents detailing different ways he had considered killing her. They found his financial records, proving he had been funneling money into private accounts in preparation for a life without her. The biggest revelation came when they uncovered his connection to Lila Voss. She had known about his plan, had even encouraged it. She had been waiting for the moment Sienna was gone, so she and Damon could be together, living off the money from Sienna's life insurance. But their plan had failed. The trial was swift. The evidence was undeniable. Damon was sentenced to life, in prison, while Lila faced charges for conspiracy. Sienna sat in the courtroom, listening as the judge delivered the verdict. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was exhaustion. When it was over, she stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air. She had survived. Damon had tried to take everything from her, but he had failed, and now she was finally free.